In our final segment, while researching information about the cost of colleges, I actually stumbled onto a brand new website called costoflearning.com. It gives real financial information about colleges, and it allows families and students to do easy comparisons of different schools out there. So we asked the creator to join us to explain how it works. And joining us now is Jimmy Becker. He is the founder and CEO of costoflearning.com. Came all the way from Boston to be here, so appreciate that very much. So I'm going to ask you to kind of walk us through the website a little bit, and this intrigued me, a net price calculator. And when we talk about comparisons, we picked 4 schools here. We've got SUNY at Binghamton, New York University, Columbia University, and Rutgers, 4 big schools or important schools in our area. And the net price calculator, what does that mean? What does that do as we look at these figures here?
Sure. The basic idea is it's very complicated to figure out what the true price you're going to pay, because it's typically not the list price for most families. And it's also very hard to compare across colleges. So the basic idea here is if you know roughly what your family income level is, you can see what your net price is going to be for different colleges. And a very nice feature we have also is for state universities, the pricing is different depending whether you're an in-state or an out-of-state student. Right. So you can toggle to in-state and out-of-state pricing, and you can see that the prices change.
Okay, so SUNY school here, you know, family income level or family contribution? Help me to understand that.
Sure. The expected family contribution in brief is when you fill out the financial aid form, the FAFSA, it asks for your family income and assets and a lot of information, and it boils it down to one number. And that one number, based on a complex algorithm, is your EFC. Okay. And your EFC is the basis for financial aid awards.
So this is telling me, as I look at these 4 schools, if I've applied for financial aid and this is my number, $20,000, that's going to be the different prices on those schools? Because that's a pretty broad range there, isn't it?
That's exactly right. Wow. Very broad range. And a lot of it's counterintuitive. Okay. Which schools are the most and least expensive. Okay.
Okay. Let's look at the next screen, because you're giving us more than just this net price calculator. We're also, in terms of looking at schools, say a specific school like a SUNY school, you look at the total number of students, undergraduate students. You also look at endowment. And why is looking at endowment important?
Sure. A key number I like to look at is the endowment per student. And that's an important number because there's typically a pretty direct correlation between how wealthy the school is, as expressed by its endowment, and what the net pricing is. Typically, wealthier schools are much more generous with their pricing than less wealthy schools, as you would expect.
Okay, so when you look at SUNY,
this is Columbia.
Switched over to Columbia here. Columbia, which has a huge endowment, $62 million. That's pretty big, and so the endowment per student is huge as well, too.
Let me just correct that. So Columbia's endowment per student is about $300,000, which is huge. You're correct. It's about $7.6 billion. So Columbia's endowment is very, very large, and if you went back to the net pricing, you would see that Columbia, somewhat counterintuitively, is the least expensive of the 4 schools that you picked. It costs less to go to Columbia for lower and middle income families than it does to go to the state school, SUNY.
Okay. And let's keep screening up here a little bit. There we go. And now we're looking here at graduation rates. And you look at which school we have here. We have Columbia still up on the screen. Graduation rates for Columbia, very high, 80%, so that's a good number. But look at that, 6-year graduation rate. What does that mean, that the students stayed extra time? It took them longer to graduate?
That's
correct.
They were
on a 5-year program
or a 6-year program.
Or a 6-year program.
But these are very high numbers. These are very successful graduation rates.
Right. So I wonder if we looked at SUNY, if we could do a comparison there, and we're going to call that up. Okay, so here we look at SUNY, and their 4-year graduation rate, 68%.
Much, much lower.
Much lower. So what they're saying here is essentially a lot of students are staying more than 4 years at the SUNY school.
That's correct. And so it becomes more expensive to go there because you have to pay for more years.
Now, when you initially send your child off, you're thinking it's only going to be 4 years. But this tells you, at this school in particular, a lot of kids are staying there a lot longer.
That is correct.
Okay, okay. Let's look at some tips that you have for us, too, because I think it's important. You mentioned this a little bit, but let's go over it again. Consider highly selective private colleges. Why is that?
It's somewhat counterintuitive, but the most selective private colleges are the wealthiest, generally with the largest endowments. and they usually offer the most generous financial aid. So these top selective schools like the Ivy Leagues, for example, but not limited to them.
You're more likely to get more money from these schools.
You're almost certainly going to get more money, and the net price is going to be lower than going to a state college.
Okay, and your second tip here, if we can bring that up, consider less selective colleges, which is the opposite of that tip.
So it's somewhat the opposite. The reason for that is, if you go to a school that's below what you're capable of getting in, if you're considered a pretty desirable student for them, they will often offer you more money in merit aid because they want to incent you to attend their school because it's going to raise the average level of students.
So we talk about kids going for their reach schools. Maybe consider an under-reach school a little bit because you might get more money out of that.
Correct.
School. Okay, let's take a look at tip number 3. Avoid out-of-state schools, essentially. Why is that?
The out-of-state state universities generally are the most expensive places for most families to go because their tuition is higher than what it would be for in-state schools, and many state universities do not offer much financial aid for out-of-state kids. So these are typically more expensive than private colleges.
Okay, wow, interesting. Submit financial aid forms early. Why is that?
Most colleges have a limited financial aid budget, and they're going to give out all of that money. And if your financial aid form, the FAFSA as it's known, is late, there may not be enough financial aid left for you to get a full award.
So this limited pot of money there, get in and grab it out of the pot
as early as you
before
can.
Anybody else does. Okay, and this is the 5th and final tip here. Maximize federal student loans.
Your last guest raised this also, and he's absolutely right. Federal student loans are much, much better for students than private student loans. And the main reason is they're eligible for income-based repayment plans. So if you get into financial trouble after college, they offer a safety valve in terms of the repayments you're going to make. Private student loans are not eligible for income-based repayment. So you should always maximize your federal. There's a limit to what you can get.
Right.
But you should always maximize federal before you get any private.
Go for the most at the federal level. Okay. Excellent tips. Good luck with the website. Hope a lot of folks will check it out.
Great.
Thanks for being on the program with us.
Very happy to be here.
Thanks. And that's going to do it for this edition of Up Close. If you missed any of today's program, you can catch it again on our website, 7online.com/upclose. And thank you again for watching. I'm Diana Williams. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Have a good one.